starting with the title of the report, right? It was very intriguing and interesting when we kind of came about brainstorming about what the title of the report should be, right? We're very clear that we've entered a new phase of transformation, right? The entire GCC ecosystem, and then the 4.0 was quite apparent in terms of the way that we've evolved as an ecosystem. But from a perspective of where we've seen the overall ecosystem, kind of grow from strength to strength, just taking you back, we all know that, in 1980s was the first GCC that was set up in the form of Texas Instruments in Bangalore. But if you really look at how the ecosystem has evolved and changed, right? Back in the day, we really used to see large legacy organizations come in, set up their centers predominantly for, just almost what we call as services organizations, right? Just serving the larger global entities, and just, following orders, if you could call it that way. And that's hence the entire terminology captive that came about, right? Gradually, organizations started owning certain modules, certain parts of certain products, certain portfolios, right? Could be procurement, operations, so on and so forth, right? And that's how they evolved, right? And then eventually, more recently, we've seen organizations drive end-to-end products. We have centers of excellence that being set up in India. We also have end-to-end, say, portfolios from GPS or shared services perspective, right? So both technology and non-technology, we've seen some serious advancements in the past 8 to 10 years, where a lot of organizations are really driving end-to-end portfolios from India. But really, if you look at what's happening over the past couple of years, especially after the COVID era, and where we see this ecosystem move forward is where India GCC is completely redefining the what we were initially meant to be, right, as a GCC ecosystem. Today we are seeing extreme amounts of business partnering that is happening, right? We are seeing global roles that are there. We're seeing large transformation charters being driven from India. India teams are really picking up emerging marketing charters. We're seeing companies really look at how can they be more aligned with the P&L of a particular product or a particular business unit, right, from India. So in a sense, it's completely very different from what we set out for, right, as a GCC, the definition of GCCs. And I'm really glad to kind of share that India is leading that way for the globe, right? What the true potential of a global hub is actually, right? So, and that's the essence of the title of the report and this entire report itself, right? How's the ecosystem evolving? What are the key levers that we're seeing that are backing this transformation? And more importantly, what's the way forward, right? And some interesting insights that we've called out, and we're going to share some of those as we go along. Right, starting with some numbers per se. It's very kind of clear that the growth has been enormous, right? Just from the revenue contribution of India GCC as an ecosystem, right? We are touching about 46 billion US dollars at a CAGR of about 11.5%, right? Now, what's harder to see in this is that the share of the engineering services, ER&D services, is growing faster than perhaps the IT and BPM services. So it's very clear that increasingly a lot of GCCs in India are driving engineering work, right? Which of course, so just to clarify what an engineering or ER&D definition would be, is any product or application that it could be hardware or software, which is used by the end user and generates revenue for the organization, is what we classify as ER&D, engineering R&D. IT, on the other hand, is anything that is more internal applications, or it could be enterprise IT of sorts, right? So it could be IT infra, it could be system integration, so on and so forth. And of course, BPM is anything to do with shared services, operations, could be retail operations, banking operations, so on and so forth. That in essence is BPM. It could be tech support, customer support, so on and so forth, right? That's what we classify as BPM. So it's very clear that India as an ecosystem is rampantly growing, and the share of engineering type of services that we are providing is growing at a faster rate, right? And why and how is all of this kind of propelled? Clearly by the increased amount of digitization across industries, right? So think about the automotive industry. We're seeing enormous amount of software that's going into the car, right? Think about industrial 4.0. I mean, enormous amount of technology that's going into, say, building smart factories, so on and so forth, right? So I think that's one of the key drivers of how the industries itself, is adopting technology. And given that India has such a kind of advantage with respect to driving technology work right from the country, I think a lot of that work is propelling this growth. From an overall number standpoint, like I earlier mentioned, right, we started in early 1980s. Today we're at about 1580 unique MNCs. We've grown at about 60% over the past, give or take, 10 years. And these 1580 GCCs employ about 1.66 million people. So this is the installed talent that work for these GCC ecosystem, right? Also interesting to see that a lot of organizations today have what we call as a multi-center approach, right? So they have more than one office or center in India, and these 1580 centers have about 2,700 plus such offices or centers across the country. Now, what's significantly changing, right? Like I earlier mentioned, companies in India, global companies are not coming to India only for legacy work. Today, companies are trying to solve for the most complex challenges that they have in hand from India, right? We see many global organizations setting up their first GCC or an offshoring center in India, right, before looking at any other country, right? So many examples that we have where companies have chosen India as their first go-to destination, right? And for various known reasons, right, in terms of just the profits that we have from the entire globalization hotspot perspective, right? So that's that. The other thing that's significantly changing in the ecosystem is the reasons why they are coming, right? Uh, Gone are the days where companies want to just set up for scale, right? 10,000, 20,000 people. Today, companies are really looking at very focused, high quality teams, and that might be small teams of 100, 200, 500. But very specifically looking at how can we drive more high value work from India rather than just large quantum. Quantum can happen, but the focus is clearly on value. So we see a lot more, smaller centers coming in and really driving cutting edge work. Also, what's significantly worked for the growth of the ecosystem is just the know-how about India, right? At the global level. So the India playbook has become so popular globally that companies today and leaders, in fact, today, if they, global leaders, if they move jobs, one of the first things that they, kind of bring into play is the India GCC, kind of aspect where if they already don't have a presence here, or double down on just the presence and the kind of value that they're driving from India. So it's across the board. And the other aspect is, of course, not only do we see companies coming in from the US, but increased presence from Europe as well as the Asian headquartered MNCs as well, right? So that's the other clear sign that we see. The last one here is on how global unicorns are also longing towards India and are setting up their centers of excellence in the country, right? Just from a talent distribution perspective, we have Bangalore takes the lion's share at about 34% of the overall talent. So what you see on your screens is the number of GCC units and the GCC talent. So the number on the left on each of those, kind of representations, the percentage of units, and the one on the right with the people symbol is the percentage of talent that is present in that particular city. So Bangalore clearly takes the lion's share, about 34%. This is followed by NCR at 16%, and then we have pretty much equal share between Mumbai, Pune, and Hyderabad, about 12 to 13, kind of percent, and Chennai at about 10%, right? So, and this has been the case from quite some time. But if you really look at two aspects in this, right? Where are the new centers being set up, and where is the expansion happening, right? So we clearly see some trends there. When you talk about new centers coming in, we still continue to see Bangalore at number one, right? In terms of most of the organizations continue to choose Bangalore as their first entry point into India. Having said that, other cities like Hyderabad, Pune, Mumbai, NCR are also seeing a significant upward movement in terms of inflow of net new companies. But having said that, Bangalore still takes spot one. When you come to expansion of existing organizations in India, Hyderabad takes number one spot, where companies that want to set up the second or third center in their tier one locations are increasingly choosing Hyderabad, and it's well known the kind of support that the Hyderabad ecosystem provides, the government provides, etc. And as a result, we're seeing a lot of companies setting up their second, third center in Hyderabad, as well as a fair share of net new companies also coming into the city, right? So that's a view that we have. So as a result, we believe the share of workforce will start increasing in some of the other cities apart from Bangalore, and of course Chennai. There is, we believe, again, prime for organizations to kind of look into and also grow their presence. And certain organizations have already started doing that. From a tier 2, tier 3 perspective, this is another trend that we're seeing. Increasing number of GCC organizations moving into tier 2, tier 3 locations. In fact, we are also seeing net new organizations, right, setting up their first centers in India in a tier 2 or tier 3 location, right? So that's we recently saw an FMCG organization set up in Ahmedabad as their first presence in the country, right? Of course, apart from just giving you cost advantage of anywhere between 15 to say even 30% in some sense, this also gives you an advantage of higher retention. A lot of the talent in these ecosystems would want to work in that particular city or neighboring cities, and as a result, we are seeing increasing retention rates, lower attrition rates, lesser challenges on overall engagement, etc. So solve some of those people related challenges, but absolutely budding ecosystems which companies are increasingly looking at exploring, right? Just from a ranking perspective, Ahmedabad comes right on top from various perspectives, from ease of doing business to just talent availability to cost, etc. So if we put all of that together, Ahmedabad comes on top, and then you have various other cities within the south. You have Madurai, Coimbatore, Kochi, Trivandrum, and then you have Vadodara and Kolkata, Jaipur, Chandigarh are the other ones that really come up, right, from a ranking perspective. We're gradually touching about 100,000 people in these tier 2 cities, which are employed by GCCs. But having said that, a lot of the talent in tier 2 cities are actually employed by services organizations, right? The services organizations which are the TCS, Infosys, Tech Mahindras, Capgemini's of the world. A lot of talent actually resides there. And one of the talent acquisition strategies that GCCs adopt is to try and see how you could find a fitment of that talent in your GCC, right, to start off with. So so that's that, and with the various initiatives that we have by the state governments in Karnataka, the KDEM, right, the Karnataka Digital Economy Mission, that is something that's specifically looking at developing various other hubs apart from Bangalore. They call it the Beyond Bangalore initiative, and yeah, setting up those hubs for global organizations to come and set up. is something that is interesting to see, right? How it progresses. In fact, just yesterday heard of one German organization set up in Belgavi or Belgaum, and that's their first center in India, right? So increasingly we could see some of this happening, and the tier 2, tier 3 cities really propelling the growth that we're seeing. Animesh, any questions that
So there was a question from Dr. Yogesh. We wanted to understand some insights on tier 2 cities, which is already answered. There was a question from Anusha on the cost advantage of tier 2 cities. So which is again answer to that question.
Yeah, so just to add to that, Anusha, I think one of the things that you've asked is it on employee cost real estate? It's a little bit of both. At least prior to COVID, there was a significant employee cost difference, anywhere between 20 to 30% itself. After COVID, just given the remote working environment, etc., and a lot of, I won't say a lot, but about 5% of all the organizations in the industry are allowing for complete remote work, which has increased kind of the expectations of employees in these locations who would perhaps be open to work remotely. And in that sense, that perhaps gap has bridged a little bit, but still continues to exist, right? It could be 15 to 30%. And of course, real estate costs as well, right? The real estate cost between a tier 2 and a tier 1 city could be anywhere between 10 to 20% as well, right? So if you put all of that together, we could easily see an advantage of about 20 to 25% from a tier 2 location perspective.
Well, we have another question from Saraswati. So she wanted to understand any tier 2 cities in Karnataka that is coming up as to ease burden in Bangalore.
Yeah, so the cities that we see coming up in Karnataka, at least a push from the government, is like I mentioned earlier, Belagavi. We are also seeing a push towards the Shimoga region, Dharwad region. Mysore again has not seen too much traction, but Mysore is something that the government is also trying to focus on. So Mangalore, Belagavi, Shimoga, Dharwad, and Mysore are the locations that we're predominantly seeing a push towards.
And well, we have another question from Dakshin. So what are the impacts from new regulation on GCC, like Scheme 2 GDPR?
Sorry, I missed that question, Animesh. Can you come again?
So he wanted to understand what the impacts from new regulations on GCC, like GDPR, Schemes 2, etc.
Oh yeah, I think that's a good one, right? So from a GDPR regulation right now, we're not seeing any major impact, right? I think all the compliances are being met by organizations, and frankly, if you look at it in my further slides, I will talk about that in terms of how companies are being very smart in terms of what portfolios they're choosing to run from India versus what portfolios perhaps they want to keep away from India, right? Anything that's bossy, complicated from a compliance standpoint, they will not. But we still believe that a lot of work that is that is being driven from India is all compliant to GDPR. There is in fact no major impact. Organizations are increasingly bringing in work from across Europe and the rest of the world. So no major impact.
So there's another question from Readout where he wanted to understand what kind of talent are companies going to tier 2 and tier 3 cities?
Yeah, so that's a good question. It's very clear that organizations are not looking for top niche talent in tier 2, tier 3 cities. They are specifically, if you want very specific, technology skills, niche skills, it's still in tier 1 cities. Companies are really going for larger BPM kind of talent, to be IT talent, design talent, right? Think of the talent that's available in services organizations in these locations, which is easy to be kind of ported into your organizations, and the kind of talent that even services organizations have that are large scale, you could say banking ops, retail ops, IT talent, system integration kind of talent. So all of IT, BPM, operations kind of talent is what companies are predominantly setting up for.
There's a question from Prakesh where he wanted to understand the cost differential across tier 1 cities in India, like Bangalore, Hyderabad, and Delhi.
Yeah, so that's an interesting one and often asked question. Earlier, prior to the remote working scenario, we used to see a significant, I won't say significant, but a quite a substantial difference between a Bangalore and rest of India. anywhere between 10 to say 15 or even 20% in some cases across salaries and running of operations and so on and so forth. We have seen that bridge significantly, just given that people have gone remote, and a lot of companies are also allowing remote working as an option for select type of employees, select skill sets. So that's reduced from Bangalore to the rest of say India to about 5 to 10%. In some cases, no difference at all. But still, I think Bangalore is expensive by about 5-10% across.
And there's a question from Priyanka where she wanted to understand the salary, like compensation and benefit differential between tier 1 and tier 2 cities.
So Priyanka, from a compensation and benefits differential, tier 2, tier 3, tier 1 versus the tier 2 cities, so here's the thing, right? So some organizations have clearly gone out and called out that difference, right? So differentiated salaries in tier 1 and tier 2 cities, and a few software internet organizations that have done that. What they've done is, basis the choice of location of the employee, they have gone about kind of defining a salary band. Now, they are not reducing the salaries of the employees that have chosen tier 2 cities, but they have mentioned that over the next few years, they will bring about that difference through salary increase percentages, right? So they'll kind of create that differentiated salary and compensation through that particular exercise over the next 2 to 3 years. From a benefits perspective, I think it's quite standardized. I think companies want to provide a kind of holistic experience across wherever you're located, right? So from a benefits perspective, we typically don't see, unless they are completely working remotely. If an individual or set of individuals working completely remotely, then companies are specifically rethinking those benefits. Yeah, I'll take one more maybe, Animesh.
Sure. So there's a question from Radhakrishnan where he wanted to understand on movement of talent from tier 1 cities to tier 2 or 3 cities.
Yeah,
Any
so
insight?
rather to that question, I think we saw extremely kind of aggressive movement from tier 1 to tier 2 to 3 cities during the lockdown. We're all wary to that that fact. But what we've also seen is that slow movement of this talent back into tier 1 cities, right? So we've increasingly already seen and also seeing with organizations kind of putting the guidelines of working from office. It could be hybrid environment, etc. Slowly but surely, we are seeing employees come back. But having said that, we clearly see a 10 to 15% increase in the overall talent availability in tier 2, tier 3 locations, just given the entire situation that's panned out, right? People going back to their hometowns and then gradually coming back. We still believe a significant amount will return back, just given more organizations will kind of tighten the noose around working from office or the hybrid approach. Increasing people will come back to tier 1 locations. Having said that, there will be enough and more talent that's homegrown in tier 2, tier 3 locations by, like I mentioned, the startup ecosystem, the service product ecosystem, and now with a lot of GCCs also providing the remote option, and that will help these ecosystems. Awesome. So we'll come back to some of the questions as we go along. This was the tier 2, tier 3 view that we had. Yeah, just very quickly, just in terms of the headcount split, like I mentioned, we have about 1.66 million people working in the GCC ecosystem. Just to give you a view, if you look at the overall, kind of ITS sector, includes startups, includes services organizations, we'd be about, give or take, 6 million to 7 million people, right, overall. And out of that, the GCC ecosystem is about 1.66 million. So that's just a comparison. Now, the largest share of this 1.66 million talent is the ER&D talent, engineering talent. That's followed by the BPM talent at about 35%, and IT at about 23%. So that's the overall kind of view of the split of talent. What's also clear about the the India ecosystem is that companies are not restricting themselves to one type of work. They're going across the board with, we can very clearly see in terms of the intensity of work that's been done across industries. ER&D, engineering, R&D work is clearly been done in a large extent, to a large extent. That's followed by IT, but increasingly we are seeing companies diving into finance, procurement, sales, tech support, etc. kind of work, right? So that's also increasingly picking up. And what's really happening is how companies are pivoting, not just setting up shared services, but creating true global business services from India. So what's the difference between shared services and global business services? One is, of course, the structural change, right? Instead of these teams reporting into core functions, they report into a GBS leader. So a lot more synergy and a lot more, say, standardization that can be achieved across functions. But more importantly, how you're going to leverage technology, automation, how companies are going to leverage just process standardization as well as data analytics, right? Across these functions is going to be a critical differentiator of bringing this work into India, right? Frankly, we believe that companies should not be, India GCC should be very picky and choosy about what they bring into India. Long gone are the days that you just take everything that comes your way. But today, companies are extremely choosy in terms of what they want to drive from India. And that's where we need to really think about not just lifting and shifting work into India, but thinking through with the global leaders in terms of what value add can India provide through the layers of technology, through the layers of automation, through the layers of data, and then really optimize or lift and shift, and then optimize it at the global level, and then lift and shift it to India, right? So increasingly we're seeing companies being picky and choosy, and also partnering with the services ecosystem, right? Not everything needs to be done internally, and I'll talk a little bit about that in the future slides. But you can think about leveraging services organization and working with them from the India level. Right. So here are the 4 stages, right? Like I was mentioning earlier, wave 1 really was about focusing on delivery, and we really talked about cost savings as a key driver. Then we moved to wave 2, which we call as a satellite zone, where it was all about excellence in delivery. There are certain modules that we would own. Then we moved to wave 3.0, where entire portfolios were, kind of or are currently being run from India centers. And here's where we see the inflection point from a value perspective, right? Companies that find real high value are the ones who kind of pivot from just being at the portfolio hub, which a lot of organizations today are at, into going into what we call as wave 4.0, right? Which is the transformation hub. Now, in wave 3.0, when your portfolio you're managing end-to-end products, it could be end-to-end portfolios as well. Sure, you have maybe an established GBS, some global roles, right? You're focusing on innovation, so on and so forth. But really, wave 4.0 is about how can you be more a business center rather than just a GCC, right? You're talking about having general manager roles in India, which actually have P&L responsibilities, right? India is an emerging market, and we believe a lot of those, or a lot of your future customers will lie in India and the region, right? Given that it's complex to operate out of China, you can leverage India as a wormhole for China, right? Think of monetizing your services capabilities. A lot of companies that we've seen have started monetizing their services, right? Or platforms that they've created for their internal organization. We know of a FMCG organization that has created such advanced tools in the finance domain, and have today carved that particular finance functions with its tools as a separate organization, and now is serving other GCCs, leveraging their services and their tools and the platforms that they've created, and monetizing their capabilities, right? So that's a unique case, and that's where we are saying that we were never meant to do this, right? As a global center, nobody told us that this was our charter. This was India's vision and India leaders, kind of entrepreneurial, mindset that really has led to this, right? And in terms of multiple other things, right? Like I mentioned, companies have started now thinking about expanding to newer markets, not only from thinking about what products or services could do well there, but actually owning that charter of moving in and running, the driving point on setting up those centers and organizations, right? As well as very specifically, if you look at it, driving customer centricity programs. The largest, clearly, most of the organizations have the largest engineering and product workforce in India. And how can you bring in more customer centricity? We were talking to a large SaaS organization which runs its entire APAC customer service, team from India. It's based in India, and the entire APAC team reports into India. The engineers, kind of travel, customers come into the India Experience Center. There's a lot of learning and sharing that happens, and the improvisation of the product happens at the ground level in India, right? So significant strides that the India ecosystem has taken, and that's why we're saying that just the entire blueprint, India is really defining that the new blueprint for what a global center can achieve. And I'll talk about what's remaining, right? So here's where we're talking about more business outcomes rather than just delivery focused, right? I think a lot of GCCs today are still delivery focused, but companies that see exponential value will be ones that are business focused. So how have companies gotten here, and how are companies progressing towards Wave 4.0? We've called out 7 of these key drivers. Of course, there are a few more, but we thought these are 7 most relevant ones. One is, of course, backing and on India's engineering prowess, right? Just the fact that we have such a large engineering talent base, a high quality one at that, as well as the kind of use cases that we've already shown, right, in the industry. Second one is by being a GBS powerhouse, and we have many examples of how companies have become true global business services, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Then we have winning the digital age, right? Just in terms of the kind of digital talent that we have, digital ecosystem that we've built, not only in the GCC ecosystem, right, but India as a whole. Think about just the payment stack. Think about the ONDC that's coming up. We're thinking really digital from word go, and that's something that is almost built into our culture, right? So that's the other one. Also a sandbox for global leadership. How we have really kind of almost nailed the cultivation of global leadership, and we can see that across, right? You can see the number of CEOs globally that have an Indian origin, as well as India GCC leaders who've gone up to get key positions, right, across many MNCs. Then masters of network globalization. This here we're talking about a true hub and spoke kind of model in terms of how India is leading the way to set up some of these global hubs. Then we move to India's new talent code, which is basically about just the kind of talent and the kind of workforce that we have, and how do we really ensure that they are productive and kind of motivated to deliver to the maximum. And then finally, in terms of our journey to sustainable value, we'll talk a little bit about that, right? So we've picked 4 or 5 out of these 7. I'm going deeper into this. We of course have our detailed report in which you'll find a lot more. This is just given the time restriction, we just deep diving into about 4 or 5 of these. All right. So the first pillar is India's engineering prowess. Here's a global snapshot of the software engineering talent available across the world, right? And this is a latest study that we've done, updated as of early this year. And this gives you a comparison of the software engineering talent available across the world, right? And predominantly in global centers, right? Or centers that companies choose to globalize. Now it's very clear that if you're and we've kept US as a benchmark, right? In terms of how does the world compare against the US from availability cost perspective. US is at about 1.5 million installed talent for software engineers. If you were to globalize more nearshore to the US, you have Canada as an option, Mexico, Brazil, etc. Canada clearly is seeing a lot of influx of talent. We are seeing it grow by about 8 to 10% year on year from a talent perspective. But the cost of operating in Canada is quite quite high, right? It's about give or take 60 or 70% the cost of running your teams in the US, which gives you other options of Mexico, Brazil, Argentina. Argentina, if you've been noticing, the inflation is skyrocketing. Companies are having to give salary increases every month, if not every quarter. And then you have Mexico and Brazil, which are sizable ecosystems. But what we've consistently heard from our clients who have centers there is the quality of talent as well as the maturity of leadership to manage end-to-end products or portfolios, right? So that becomes a hindrance there. You come to further towards Central and Eastern Europe, you see these smaller bubbles. Again, extremely great when you want to set up smaller team size, 100, 200, maybe up to 500. But anything beyond that becomes very challenging for you to scale and kind of sustain. But extremely great talent. So you can think of setting up niche centers of excellence, material sciences, data analytics, cybersecurity, so on and so forth. Is something that you can definitely look at Central and Eastern Europe. But scale is a challenge, and cost is slightly higher than operating in countries such as India and Brazil. And then that leaves us with the two large bubbles in Asia, which is China and India. China, clearly, there's a lot of geopolitical, challenges that we're facing, and as a result, the sentiment towards China and the investments towards China are limited. Of course, barriers on a language front, so on and so forth, are the other concerns, which is actually, which leaves India as the biggest bubble there, about 3 million talent, growing at about 15%, a significant rate. And this is high quality software engineering talent you were talking about, right? So India clearly is the largest ecosystem, right? Largest viable ecosystem, I'd say, and in a year or two we will surpass China. And from a cost advantage, it's still very cost positive when you talk about cost arbitrage, right? So, and some of you might be saying how. Maybe we'll come back and maybe take that during the Q&A. Right. So this is Zinnov's 4-stage maturity framework. I'd introduced it, in the form of wave 1, 2, 3, 4. And when we mapped organizations on this, right, here's the spread from a maturity perspective, right? Back in the day, you'd see a lot of these bubbles more towards left. That's the number that you see in circled in red. But today, we're seeing a lot of these companies move to the right of the entire spectrum, right, towards what we call as portfolio as well as transformation hub. So significant number of companies today have moved to the right. Also, what's interesting is the newer companies that are coming in, right? Say the Teslas of the world, the Pure Storages of the world, the Mercaris of the world, the Blacklines of the world, are not really coming in coming in and landing in outpost or even satellite. They're coming right at the center of this maturity curve or even in portfolio hub, right? And then trying to move towards further right of the entire spectrum. So that's what we're seeing significantly change, right? And increasingly, we believe that the ones that are on the right will see the right value of India. Also, very interesting to notice, we mapped the engagement levels as well as attrition levels of companies across these four, kind of stages, and we found that companies that have a higher maturity typically tend to have lower challenges on attrition, on say moonlighting, or employees being dissatisfied, so on and so forth, right? So higher you're on the maturity level, automatically some of those talent and people related challenges get solved for. As of course, as talent is looking at more cutting edge challenges to work on, and higher maturity of work, of course, a great organization from an experience perspective as well. So here are some of the kind of use cases from like I mentioned, engineering perspective that are being solved. From automotive, we're seeing everything from ADAS to infotainment to power electronics being solved. We know a lot of advancements in braking technology happening. From a retail perspective, is the entire warehouse management is being run from India, bringing in digitization as well as data analytics in warehouse management. Yeah, anything to do with CGI and advanced technologies also in the retail space. We know of healthcare organizations that are doing anything from RF devices to molecular testing to fluorescence imaging from their India center. And I'd already mentioned about the infrastructure, right? Smart factories, Industry 4.0, predictive maintenance, etc. Increasingly happening, and we see across all of these the horizontal technologies playing a part, right? Cybersecurity, AI, intelligent automation, and cloud, and that's where we're seeing a lot of demand of talent, right? Now, just given the entire macroeconomic scenario, we know that some organizations are, kind of reducing their workforce. Some organizations have perhaps even put, hiring on freeze. But there are ample and more opportunities that are being created in the other sectors, right? And especially some of these sectors that we're talking about. These sectors need digital age talent, and as a result, a lot of these organizations have created opportunities for the talent that is now seeking opportunities in newer opportunities rather. Also, what's powering our ecosystem is just the startup kind of startup ecosystem that we have, and the internal innovation focus, right, along with the academia collaboration that's happening. We've seen a sharp rise in the programs that companies are running. From a startup collaboration perspective, we've seen the numbers grow from 13% to 47% from a partnership program perspective. Internal innovation programs like hackathons have grown 4x. Internal accelerators have gone 3x, and venture builders have gone from 7% to 27%. And similarly, academic collaboration, very important to note that even now in some cases companies only look at academia for talent acquisition, but the real value for organizations is when they partner with academia on research-led partnerships, right? So that's gone up 27% from 40% in 2010, right? So that's been a significant change, and also from a consulting perspective, significant jump from 7 to 33%, right? So it's very clear that that companies and MNCs are really looking at not only driving internal innovation programs, but also work with the startup academia to be able to drive advanced research and outcome-based projects. And just to round that up, we have just the number of corporates engaging in open innovation and inorganic growth. That's increased by 1.3x from 21 to 22, even though we saw the macroeconomic ecosystem, the way it played out. And the number of deals have significantly increased by 250 plus, M&A deals by 55 plus, and open innovation programs, we have about 80 plus of those programs, right? So that rounds up our engineering prowess section. Anish, do you have any questions on this section?
Sorry, yeah. So we have a question from Vivek. We wanted to understand the source for the global talent map and what is the level of confidence in the data.
Yeah, so the source of our data is both through indigenous research as well as our proprietary sister concern company called Drop. So between Drop and Zinnov Research, we do a lot of data mining across various secondary platforms, and we try and validate that with our connects in the ecosystem across the world. So we're quite confident about that. If there's any specific question, we'd be happy to get in a conversation and help clarify that as well.
Again, there's a question from Dattatreya where he wanted to understand whether there's a threat from East Asian countries from cost and talent.
Sorry, I didn't get that, Tanish.
So there's a question from Dattatreya. We wanted to understand, is there any threat from East Asian countries from cost and talent perspective?
Okay, all right. So yes and no. From East Asian countries, what we've really seen is there is some sort of a cost pressure or cost advantage, if you could call it, from say a country like Vietnam, Philippines, etc. Right? But having said that, that's predominantly on the non-engineering work, right? It could be BPM type of work, tech support, call support. It could be shared services in parts. But clearly, these countries are not able to manage some of the IT and engineering work, right? And as a result, although perhaps from a cost perspective, they would be slightly better, so I'd say 5-10% better. or less expensive. But from a quality perspective, I think that far outweighs the advantage that you get in cost. Only for BPM from a BPM perspective, these countries could kind of stand their ground with respect to the kind of work that they're doing.
So there's a question from Nitya on the Zinnov maturity slide. So she wanted to understand how was 120 plus companies picked up for the study.
Yeah, so we had rolled out a survey across the ecosystem, Nitya, and companies kind of chose to participate in the study. This also is throughout, throughout the year, we keep talking to a lot of organizations and we kind of invite them to participate. So apart from just that point in time survey, we also run this throughout the year whenever organizations choose to, kind of participate. So it's throughout the year, and the data is as kind of as of March 2023.
There's a question from Rupesh and Pragati. So they wanted to understand, like Rupesh wanted to understand how much time it takes in years to move from wave one to wave two. And Pragati has a question: are we in wave four already?
Are we in wave 4 already?
Yeah.
Okay. How much time is a very interesting question again, and one that often is asked. It's extremely dependent on the kind of kind of aspiration that the India Center has, and the kind of autonomy that the global leaders, kind of how much buy-in there is, and as well as autonomy that global provides on India. A typical timeline from wave 1 to wave 2 should not take more than 2 to 3 years if you have all the kind of nuts and bolts sorted. From wave 2 to 3 also should be about 3 to 4 years, and wave 3 to wave 4 is, again, it takes slightly longer, right, about 4 to 5 years, but we've seen organizations do that in 3 years as well, right? And some organizations don't do that at all. To the other question that was asked, are we in wave 4? Yes, I think to the slide that I presented earlier, some of our customers are already in wave 4, and that's where even Zinnov comes into picture, helping companies really explore wave 4, right? So going back to that slide, so if you can look in this slide, this is where we see some organizations already comfortably sitting in wave 4 or the transformation hub. But we believe there'll be an influx of a lot more companies into that into the wave 4, right? So by 2030, we will see a significant number of GCCs in what we call as transformation hub or the wave 4.
Another question from Radhika, where she wanted to understand which are the reasons across the world are considered as a competition, and what have Indians done differently to stay ahead of the competition.
Yeah, I think some of them I've already spoken about. We have an advantage of scale, we have advantage of cost, we have advantage of quality of talent, we have advantage of the ecosystem, whether it be startup ecosystem, we have a extremely vibrant one at that. We have a extremely strong academia ecosystem, and those are all of the components to make us extremely successful. We have a extremely strong backup kind of ecosystem in the form of services organizations and the likes, and the India MNC organizations, which is, again, gives you a lot of that talent impetus. So those are some of the things. I think the area where we surely need some support is the government policies, right? Some of the government policies, etc., which are coming towards like we are already seeing some of them working in the favor of GCCs, but I think increasingly, if you see those work in our favor, I think will be an ecosystem really at the next level, right, in terms of what we could achieve. Awesome. Maybe we can take the other questions a little later. Right. The second key aspect that's a growth driver is the entire GBS ecosystem, right? This is a maturity view of the functions that that are present in the India GCC ecosystem from a shared services or a GBS perspective, right? It's clear that the IT function is the most mature and the most highly globalized function in India from a GBS perspective. That's followed by finance, then customer support, human resources, procurement, and sales and marketing, right? Which is fairly nascent even today, right? And the lighter shade is say of the bubble is the kind of starting point of where we saw this, I think 3 or 4 years back, to the darker shade where the maturity is today, right? So just that's a view. So clearly the ecosystem has grown by leaps and bounds, with IT and finance really leading the kind of maturity in the GBS space. Now, out of the 1,580 such companies that we have in India, 960 of them have some sort of a shared services model, right? Which either finance or HR or IT or procurement, some kind of shared services work that's being driven. 180 of them have a GBS construct, or what we call as a very, very mature shared service model. Like you mentioned, a GBS one will have a different construct itself, reporting into the GBS leaders, as well as very specifically the entire leverage of technology, data analytics, etc. So extremely robust ones where a lot of these functions talk to each other and cross leverage their best practices, right? Only about 180 of them, right? And this, the talent present in these GBS in India is about 540K approximately, right? Again, from a geography perspective, Bangalore leading there at about, give or take, 40%. That is followed by NCR and Hyderabad at 15%. And then we have Chennai that sees a higher presence here at about 12%, and Pune and Mumbai about 7 and 8% approximately, right? So that's what we've seen from a GBS perspective. Like I was mentioning in my earlier slide, IT clearly is the most advanced and most established in the industry across industry verticals, followed by finance. HR is something that's picking up, and I know there was a question on GDPR. Given the GDPR restrictions, companies are reevaluating this, but we still know of various activities, including payroll, activities such as, say, talent, talent acquisition, executive search, even just talent intelligence, right? In terms of where do you expand, what is the talent pool across the world, etc. All the intelligence being provided from India teams. Increasingly, we are now seeing procurement teams being set up here, VMO teams being set up here, sales and marketing support teams also being brought into India. So how do you build a successful GBS, right? It's important that we focus on the various levers. Like I was already mentioning, technology is a key lever. How we can leverage technology to really drive exponential value is going to be critical. Just the portfolio as well. What do you really need to pick? Do you need to pick everything in India? Maybe not. And how do you even really structure the entire organization from a reporting perspective, from a KRA perspective, from alignment perspective, is going to be critical for your success. And the people, right, in terms of taking care of people, because a lot of times we're looking at 24/7 support, and if you're providing that, it takes something different, right, for you to engage talent, and you'll have to carefully kind of look at that aspect as well. So all of this put together is very important. Just talking a little bit about the portfolio. Here's a view of how across various functions, we believe companies need to define what is core to their business and what is context, right? We've just given this a high level analysis for 4 functions on BFS operations, HR, finance, and sales and marketing, and clearly call out core as aspects that either impact customer experience or employee experience, right? So anything that's impacting your key stakeholders or your severely impacts top or bottom line is something that we believe will be core to the business and could be retained internally. And anything that's context and support and can just enables a lot of the others can be actually completely automated or moved to services organizations, or could be done out of any other country as well, right? So that's a decision that we believe India has to increasingly take going forward. Also, what's happening is this establishing of HR center of excellences. I mean, centers of excellence across, but picking up HR as an example, there are about 110 such HR COEs. What is a COE? COE is a particular function or a sub-function where they have an end-to-end ownership in the country. right? So India having an ownership of say recruitment or staffing, or it could be global mobility. So end-to-end center of excellence is what that is our definition of a COE. So we have 110 of them. 80 plus have one particular sub-function COE versus 30 plus have multiple sub-function centers of excellence, right? And these are some of the examples that we've seen in the industry across the entire talent value chain. We've seen centers of excellence where end to end, say for example, global mobility is managed. So policy definition, implementation of global mobility is done from India, in partnership, of course, with the local HRBPs.
So, Prabhu, we have a question from Vasudev. We wanted to understand, like if software and internet companies setting up sales-oriented roles such as inside sales, sales engineering, etc., in a GBS model.
Yeah. So yes, um, Nihar, we have seen significant number of companies having inside sales or sales engineering, and them reporting to the GBS leader, right? Typically, of course. So here's how it's working, right? So companies that have more of shared services kind of structure, the reporting is to direct functions, right? It could be sales or HR or finance. But organizations that have slightly more evolved kind of structure typically have consolidated reporting direct line to the GBS leader with a dotted line to the functions. Although they work with the functions, their accountability on efficiency, accountability on leveraging technology, accountability on improvising their process standardization still lies with the GBS leader, right? So that's the structure we've seen, and increasing cases where pre-sales, marketing, support is being done from India. Anything that needs time zone presence, anything that needs customers or the employee to be close to the customer is something that's not, of course, picked up by the India GBS employees. So there's another question around what are the top people challenges mature GBS organization face while setting up GBS. I think one of the clear challenges is the glass ceiling, right? So if you really look at it, the layers of separation between the customer to the GBS employee are many. So you have the customer, then you have the business account manager or whatever, or business leaders. Then you have people you work with internally, and then eventually you have the India team, India leaders, and then you have the India GBS employees. So there are several level, kind of what we call as layers of separation. So that's one of the key challenges of how do we um, get customer context to the employees. So that's one big kind of challenge we face. The other key challenge that we face is um, the glass ceiling, right? A lot of times while working in a GBS context, employees tend to gravitate towards the function itself. So instead of working for a GBS and supporting, say, global total rewards organization, why can't I just be part of the total rewards business partnering team, right? Or maybe the HRBB team. So there's we've seen an inclination of the GBS employees, the shared service employees, wanting to get integrated into the business partnering side of things, right? Either finance or HR or whatever others. So that's a second huge kind of motivation related challenge that we've seen. And the third one is just the regular ones, right? From a time zone perspective, benefits perspective, just the allowances perspective. I think just to keep them motivated, and of course the entire mental wellness, physical wellness aspect of things also comes into picture. All right. So the other key pillar is how India is a sandbox for global leadership. We've seen great successes of global leaders coming out of India centers, and we believe that we have a true sandbox for to create global leadership from India. This is our view of where we are headed as an ecosystem today. When we analyze the numbers, overall we have about 5,000 global roles in India GCCs, right? And this is as of 2022. We believe this number will quadruple by 2030 and reach about 20,000 global roles. That's a significant jump. But what's more interesting is that the rate of growth of women leaders as in global roles will be faster than the overall growth, right? So from 900 women global leaders. We believe we will reach 4,000 women global leaders by 2030, which is a significant testament to the fact that all of you organizations are putting in to develop women leaders, especially at the senior level, right? And we're seeing several such examples in the ecosystem. Just so that I can clarify, what is a global role? A global role is basically a leader that has teams across the world outside India reporting back into that individual, right? They have high collaboration with the business and have end-to-end product or process ownership, right? So typically that's what we define as a global role. Now, just from a functional perspective, the highest share of global roles are with shared services teams or GBS teams. Right? It could be, like I mentioned, finance, IT, procurement, so on and so forth. IT here is separate, beg your pardon. Followed by engineering at about 21%, and IT at about 18%. So that's the top three in terms of functions. Whereas in terms of industry, it's very clear that the software internet industry, product organizations, enterprise software organizations, these are the ones that have the largest share of global roles, clearly leading the way for the rest of the industry. That's followed by BFSI at 16%, then FMCG and the rest. Right now, when you look at and we have some cuts on the industry by type of function, and this is more for your reference. Yeah, just like we mentioned earlier, just the growth of women roles, of women in global roles. We were at about 9% in 2015. Great strides made so far at about 18%, and we're heading towards 30% representation of global roles in 2030 of the overall number of global roles. And there are many things that have led to this, just in terms of being able to run programs to attract, to build and sustain these roles, providing right amount of exposure, and a lot of boomerang programs, as well as a lot of return to office or return to work programs that companies have run over the past decade have really helped in bringing back women talent to these positions, and that's gone a long way to attract and build these leaders. Global exposure programs, we know of organizations who run specific programs across genders to be able to give that exposure from a business perspective, from a perspective of just the various other functions that are out there, right? Which perhaps you're not aware of in India, and that's happening. Also, global rotation program that a lot of companies have. In fact, we were talking to an organization which which asks all of its leaders to set up meetings with 2 other leaders when they travel globally, apart from the ones that they're actually working with, right? So they, as a mandate, they have to meet 2 other leaders from other businesses, other functions, to just open up their horizons and learn what others in the organization are doing, etc., and to also build that network. So that's a great, kind of habit to kind of inculcate in your next rung, right? Your mid-level and senior level leadership. And finally, just building those entrepreneurship traits, right? We know that entrepreneurship needs a lot of things. You need business acumen. You need, just being able to story tell. You need to think through complex situations, navigating politics, etc. So specific skills, specific trainings being provided to your senior leaders is critical towards actually building these global roles. And all of these efforts is what we are seeing. We put into that prediction of say the global roles growing by 4x over the next few years. Just given the time, I'll go through the rest of the slides and take questions at the end. The other pillar is clearly masters of network globalization. Here's a view of the hub and spoke model, right? Increasingly, organizations are operating in this model where there's the headquarters and there are specific hubs and several outposts and satellites that report into these hubs. Increasingly, India is becoming, or India tier 1 cities are becoming hubs with a lot of outposts and satellites reporting into the hub, right? So also what's happening is India is now being given the responsibility of incubating these outposts and satellites, right? So incubation of these outposts and satellites is something that India teams and India leadership teams are doing. So very quickly, in terms of how do we define hub, headquarters and outpost headquarters? I think we all know about it. But hub is typically which has 5 to 10% of the headcount, and has multiple products on engineering and kind of module leadership, even transformation hub. We know of several directors and above that are present there, even VPs in a lot of cases. Specific strong expertise, focus on both global and emerging markets, and also having strong ecosystem relationships and connects. Here are examples of different types of the hub and spoke, the variants of hub and spoke model. The first one is local reporting in the case of MetLife, where the India hub in Noida, right, has a reporting from the Jaipur center. Right? So they have a local satellite in India, reporting into the local hub in India and reporting globally. Then you have the Society General example, where you have a center outside of India, reporting back into the India hub, right? So which is Romania in this case, reporting into Bangalore, which is the hub, that reporting into Paris, which is the headquarters. And then you have the true hybrid reporting, where both India tier 1, tier 2 locations, tier 1, tier 2 locations, as well as global, global hotspots also reporting into the India center, with Mexico, Vietnam being the global hotspots, and we have Hyderabad and Coimbatore as the India, what we call as satellites or outposts, reporting all into Bangalore, and Bangalore reporting into the headquarters. Right, so that's the Bosch structure, which is a very evolved hybrid reporting structure that we've seen. And the final, kind of growth pillar is our journey towards sustainable value. We've seen an immense increase in just the mentions of sustainability by global CXOs, right? As high as 2.7 times higher by chief sustainability officers, and about 2 times by CEOs. Overall, about 2.5 times increase in mention from 2017 to 2021 in terms of just the mentions. And we've time and again seen that the top priorities of C-suites, sustainability featuring amongst them, right? It could be on just sustainably growth the business, or it could be being very transparent with respect to reporting of sustainability. It could be building technology capabilities that run around sustainability, and as well as just implementing some of those practices in the workforce, right? So sustainability has picked up momentum, right, in terms of just the conversations. And what are India GCCs doing, right, from the entire sustainability space? We have one on innovation, just really looking at innovation from technology perspective, looking at digitization, which kind of removes some of the carbon footprint. We're looking at green economics, right, in terms of which projects to fund, which not to fund, how much of a carbon footprint does, especially in the BFSI space, how much carbon footprint does it kind of create by investing or funding certain kind of projects, is something that companies are increasingly kind of analyzing. Circularity, like we all know, reduce, reuse, and remake is something that companies are adopting across the board. And that's even more for manufacturing organizations, right, where perhaps wastage is significant. Regulations related, I think companies are taking up some of these regulations aggressively, also partnering with the regulators, right, in terms of formulating some of these policies for them. And then, of course, just the behavioral changes, right, around sustainable living, so hybrid work, travel, etc. We know of a company which on their portal provides the CO2 emission for every kind of travel that they make, and they kind of have gamified it with the person who has highest travel with least average CO2 kind of presence is something that we have kind of created kind of program around. We also know of an organization that kind of keeps track of all of the global carbon footprint sustainability initiatives from the India centers. That's become a part of the shared services team, with a team of about 5 to 10 people who specifically monitor the carbon footprint of the organization, of the employees, etc., and almost reports it to to the parent to the parent organization, right, to the headquarters. So that's increasingly becoming a part of what India is doing, apart from just several organizations creating top products, SaaS-based products, to then for companies to then monitor their carbon footprint, right? So increasing innovation, like we mentioned, on that specific aspect. So that was the journey so far. Companies have already been here, they're doing this, and if you're not doing this, then you're missing out. We completely believe that every single organization out there can walk the path that's walk the path that's already been treaded, right? But here's the way forward. We believe the GCC size will touch about 60 billion by 2025. The number will go about 1,900 GCCs, and the headcount about 2 million, right? But that's not what we should aim for. The idea is not about quantity of GCCs, but it's about the quality of GCCs that we have. And we believe here are some of the key aspects that will emerge over the next 5 years, right? One is increasing number of general manager roles from India. India GCCs will have general managers which are responsible for P&L, driving P&L and driving business for global, right? And with India and Asia being a part of that. How we leverage generative AI will be a huge, kind of deciding factor on how our GCCs look in the future. We clearly have the advantage with respect to the talent, but how we really put that to use is something that's going to be important to see, and how we really work with the machine, right, is going to be important. And as a result, plan our talent strategies around that is going to be critical. The third one is peer collaboration. Although we are doing great as an ecosystem in silos, there's a huge opportunity for us to work together as an ecosystem, work with your peer organizations to be able to collaborate, to innovate, to drive efficiencies, to go to market together, so on and so forth. Everything does not need to be routed at the headquarter levels. We have a very mature ecosystem, and that can be, those partnerships can be driven in large extent in India itself. Monetizing services, like I already mentioned, a few use cases of companies being able to monetize their services and platforms. We're going to see this at scale, with this becoming a newer services driven revenue stream for a lot of the GCCs from India. So you'll now start seeing many GCCs becoming profit centers as well, or at least carving out some of the profit centers from their India teams. Really collaborating with the government for policy formulation. In our opinion, GCCs have a huge responsibility to be working with the government for the upliftment of the country as well as the larger ecosystem through policy formulation, right? So a lot of unknowns have happened in the past, and the government itself is also learning on the go in terms of the policy regulations and policy formulations. We believe the GCCs have a huge role to play in supporting the government in that, right? Especially the mature organizations need to start talking to the government a lot more. Customer-centric business development, like I mentioned, we will believe the center of gravity will gradually move towards Asia, India, and we will need to be able to understand customer requirement, or India already understands the local customer requirement and the Asia customer requirement. People able to provide that exposure to be able to then take part in in supporting business development or even driving business development to some extent. And that's something that we believe the GCCs of tomorrow will take up. Being a wormhole for European and Asian markets, right? So it's very clear that if US headquartered organizations want to sell into Asia, India can be that wormhole, and vice versa. If Asian organizations want to sell into the US, where you need English, you need a different type of understanding of the culture, etc., Indians already understand that very well. So they can use India to develop those products because we understand the global markets that well, to be able to sell into the global market. So India becoming that key kind of a sandbox environment of sorts for either of the geographies to kind of sell into each other. We believe we're at a good vantage point, And finally, hub for as a service transformation, right? For any organization that wants to move into as a service kind of a model, India has been there, done that, and they can leverage India as an ecosystem to drive that change. So that's what we had for you for today from the report. Happy to take any questions that you might have. We have about 5 to 7 minutes. Yeah, what topics will prevent from reaching this potential, asks Vinay. I think a lot of these topics or aspects that will prevent us is our own mindset. I think a lot of times we as India leaders don't have that global mindset, don't have the mindset of driving business outcomes. I think that's the biggest hindrance. I was in a panel discussion the other day, and that was another thing that came up significantly, is in the way we limiting our own potential. We stick to the template that has been drawn, but some of the organizations have gone beyond that. I think we need more of such entrepreneurial leaders to be able to kind of break those boundaries. So there's another question that says the hub and spoke model could create more separation layers. So here's what we are trying to get to, right? With the hub and spoke model, we are thinking of these global teams or regional teams as your extended teams, right? And also in that sense, solving for the complexity of all teams reporting directly into the global. Here's so what we believe will happen is, instead of the India leaders reporting into a global leader and then reporting into, say, a GBS leader sitting globally, we believe the global GBS leader itself will be based out of India, right? And we know of an example of one of the large retail GCCs where the GBS CEO, global CEO, is based out of India. So from that sense, and they have direct responsibility with say the global organization as well as with the customer. And in those kind of models, we believe the layers of separation will reduce, and hub and spoke model will augment that capability, right, to that extent.